Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, week one in the books. Time to update the ACC Power Rankings, and there has been some significant changes after week one. I think most notably Florida State. You kind of go to the preseason expectations. A lot of people in the national media, Florida State as kind of the leader in the clubhouse, then Clemson, and then that third team being Miami. We're seeing some of those expectations kind of be flipped on their head. Now, the Miami Hurricane fans know I was kind of rocking with this Miami team. They were my preseason pick to win the ACC. I feel dang good about what I saw in Gainesville this Saturday. That being said, there was plenty that I was wrong about as well. So we got to update the rankings, fired up to get into it. Now, before we do it, as always, most importantly, let it fly in the comments section. The best part about doing this is there are so many different ways you can see these ACC teams after week one. Obviously, some overreactions that are included in these rankings. Would love to hear the teams that I'm sleeping on, the teams that I might be too high on as well. Let it fly in the comments section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to update the power rankings next Thursday afternoon. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start at the top. I think Miami has asserted themselves as, at least in my opinion, the clear favorite to win the ACC. I think they have the best quarterback that's in the ACC conference. I think they have the best line of scrimmage play that you see in the ACC. When you have those two things working for you, you're going to beat a lot of football teams. And I think what you saw from Miami going into a very hostile environment in the SEC against Florida, you saw them do a lot of things at a very high level. I think most notably Cam Ward, he had that one interception in the first quarter. And then outside of that, it was one of the more impressive quarterback performances that we saw not only in the ACC, but in the country. And so I think you're feeling really good about Cam Ward being the best quarterback in this conference. But I think most notably, we're able to run the football. You saw pass catchers emerge on the outside and then just physically impose themselves on the defensive line. And the biggest question mark we had about this Miami Hurricanes team is the secondary. I thought they looked really, really good. And I think my question to the ACC fans would be, what ACC passing attacks do we see really challenge Miami in the secondary? I think most notably, can you block Miami up front in terms of that dominant pass rush that we saw? But then you look at the secondary, seemingly much better than a lot of people expected in an ACC conference where I wouldn't say you have the most prolific passing attacks. I think if you're Miami, you got to feel really good about where you kind of sit in terms of the power rankings of the ACC. Now, Clemson staying in the contender tier. I get it. It was ugly against Georgia, specifically in the second half. I think Clemson, that was a really tough spot for Clemson to get that offense right against the Georgia defense that I think is going to be special in 2024. I still think they have one of the best defenses in the country, even though Georgia put up 40 points. And I look at that game and say they were very competitive in the first half. It kind of got away from them in the second. I think more importantly, just because that Clemson offense couldn't stay on the football field. We saw some decent things from Clemson's offense, and I think it got hurt by some stupid penalties early. I still like this Clemson team, and I still think they're the second best team in the ACC, probably sitting right behind the Miami Hurricanes. And I think at the end of the day, those are the clear two best teams, at least in my opinion, in the ACC. Now, that being said, what makes this conference, I think, so exciting is you got a lot of dark horses. You got a lot of teams that I think can be sneaky good in this conference. I want to start with Louisville, where we kind of said it preseason. If Tyler Shuck stays healthy, that's a massive upgrade from what they had at quarterback last year with Jack Plummer. And they played for an ACC championship game. I think the defense is probably the most underrated aspect of this football team. It was good last year. I think it's going to be good this year. But I think most notably, Tyler Shuck at quarterback, who I think significantly better when healthy than Jack Plummer. And then more importantly, you got difference makers all over the football field for a Jeff Brom offense that's going to know how to use these difference makers. They can run the football at a high level. They can obviously push the ball down the field. I think Louisville checks a lot of boxes, and I get it was against Austin Peay. They won 62-0. That being said, I really liked what I saw. And then why I moved them over NC State. My biggest concern with NC State, and we're going to get a real quick feel for what this NC State team is about week 2 against Tennessee. My biggest concern with NC State was they weren't able to run the football that efficiently against West Carolina. And that was my biggest concern is, hey, we kind of just figured that Dave Doran would have a physically imposing offensive line. That rushing game would be good. It wasn't as efficient, specifically in the first three quarters. They forced Grayson McCall to, I think, make some throws that you don't really want Grayson McCall making in this offense. He's a quarterback that is going to be extremely accurate, especially in the short, intermediate parts of the football field. But when you're consistently kind of being in those third and long situations with that lack of a run game, it puts Grayson McCall in bad spots. And I think my biggest concern is if you couldn't run the football effectively on aggregate against an FCS team, are you going to be able to run the football in the ACC? That's my biggest question. I still like NC State. I still like Grayson McCall at quarterback. I still really do trust Dave Doran. And I think they have playmakers on the outside. I think we probably expected some growing pains with all the change that they had with the offensive playmakers. That being said, I did jump Louisville over NC State. Georgia Tech coming in at number 5. I think I'll maybe catch some heat for having Georgia Tech over Boston College when Boston College arguably looked better against Florida State. Why have Georgia Tech here? I think the defense is significantly better. That was the big bugaboo for Georgia Tech last year. That defense flat out stunk. They bring in Tyler Santucci. Throughout 2 weeks, I'm impressed with Georgia Tech in terms of not only just the players playing better, but schematically, they just seem like they know what they're doing a little bit more. And then on top of that, Haynes King, we know the kid's a gunslinger. We know he can make super dynamic, impressive plays, but you wanted to rope in the turnovers. He's done that throughout the first 2 weeks, only one interception throughout the first 2 games. Why have Georgia Tech over Boston College? I think Georgia Tech's a little bit more two-dimensional. And maybe that's an unfair statement to Boston College because they didn't really need to throw the football against Florida State, but Thomas Castellanos was only 10 of 16 for 106 yards. I worry that BC might just be a little bit too one-dimensional on offense. So that's my biggest concern there and why I have Georgia Tech up there. But I think you can't argue that offensive line looks great for Boston College. That rushing attack with Thomas Castellanos at quarterback is going to be super dynamic. I think BC kind of emerged as one of those teams to maybe look out for. And again, it's hard to evaluate because we kind of had these preseason expectations of Florida State. They obviously were significantly off. So how good is Boston College actually? We're probably going to find out over the next couple of weeks. Syracuse, another team that I put in the dark horse category. Talk about quarterbacks in the ACC. How many quarterbacks are we taking over Kyle McCord, who looked great against Ohio? They have legitimate difference makers on the outside, guys like Zede Haynes and Aronde Gaston, LaQuinn Allen at running back with a veteran line. I think this Cuse offense can put up some points. My biggest concern coming out of week 1 for Syracuse, Ohio ran the football kind of all over Syracuse. And on top of that is Syracuse's probably best player on defense, Marlo Wax, goes down with an injury. Look, if Ohio was running the football consistently against Syracuse and now you lose your star linebacker, I'm a little bit concerned about what Syracuse can do stopping the run. We're going to get Syracuse and Georgia Tech this weekend. Something's going to have to break here, but I got Syracuse coming into the dark horse category. Boston College as well. Impressive win against Florida State on the road. I kept SMU in the dark horse category for kind of 2 different reasons. One, there's not a ton of offenses that I have a ton of confidence in. SMU is one of those offenses. They're still trying to figure out what they want to do at quarterback. And I think it's easy to read in a lot against that Nevada team week 0. One, SMU clearly played bad football. I don't think there's a secret behind that. But also Nevada, I think, might be a better team than a lot of people expected coming into the season. They just went on the road to beat Troy. And so maybe we were reading too much into one, SMU clearly not playing their best football, going up against a team that we thought really stunk. Maybe they don't stink as much as we thought. I'll keep SMU in the dark horse category. They're going to be able to put up a lot of points. They're going to run fast. I think they're going to give some teams some problems. A little bit concerned specifically on the offensive line. I think that defense is kind of sneaky good, and I think the skill position around the quarterback is good. Can they block some of the best teams in the ACC? Probably my biggest question mark. Now, the outside looking in category, I'm not going to sell my stock all on Virginia Tech. Obviously, a really disappointing loss against Vanderbilt on the road. They clearly didn't play very good football and were the better team in the second half by far. And it's not an ACC loss. My biggest concern and why I kind of docked them the tier, Virginia Tech ran the football for only 75 yards. That was what we thought was going to be the identity of this Virginia Tech offense. And if Virginia Tech can't run the football consistently, like what do we think of Virginia Tech going into the ACC? That's probably the biggest question mark I have out of that football team. I don't think Vanderbilt is all that good. Maybe it was kind of, and I think on top of that, it's not like Virginia Tech had a ton of new faces and transfer portal additions. That was basically the same team in 2023, running it back in 2024. And so for them to come out and lay a dud early against Vanderbilt, I think Virginia Tech fans probably agree. You got to knock them down to the outside looking in. Now, I maybe kind of deserve to still be in that dark horse category. It wasn't an ACC loss. I could still see them being competitive with a lot of these teams, but I'm going to dock them for losing to Vanderbilt specifically because we didn't really see them run the football that effectively. Florida State, just really confused. All off season long, we were told during fall camp that this defensive line was going to be the best unit in the country, or one of. Um, we were told that DJU was building some chemistry with a lot of hyper athletic wide receivers. We were told that this veteran offensive line is going to be able to run the football. We haven't seen any of that. And I don't, maybe it's an overreaction between two games, but they kind of got the tails whipped along the lines of scrimmage against two teams. And so I don't think it's an overreaction. Florida State's got to do, I think, for lack of better terms, some soul searching, kind of find an identity with that Florida State program. And I think my biggest concern, I think a lot of Florida State fans probably agree with this, is that this is a team that was kind of built a little bit through the transfer portal. So how well does this team kind of react to some adversity early is probably my biggest question mark. I'm not selling my stock in Mike Norvell, but I have some massive question marks. UNC defense looked good against Minnesota. Not really sure if that had to do more with Minnesota's offense just not being good or vice versa. UNC making some significant changes on the offensive side of the football. This offense looks significantly worse with Drake May. I have a big question mark. I think UNC fans, we all kind of had these question marks about UNC. Your starting quarterback, Max Johnson, goes down. He wasn't particularly good in that game. That sounded not great. Prayers for Max Johnson. I hope he gets right with the broken leg. But Max Johnson didn't impress me that much. And then this UNC offense as a whole seemed like it was very reliant on Amari and Hampton, who's a player that, again, you want to be reliant on him. He's one of the best running backs in the country. But I think we all have concerns about that UNC offense. Pitt coming in, they gave up 24 points against Kent State, which kind of got my radar buzzing, so to speak. That being said, went back, watched a little bit of the game. They only gave up 210 total yards. And so I think that score in terms of their defense maybe lacks a little bit of context. The Pitt offense looked significantly different. And Pat Narduzzi actually letting his new offensive coordinator cook a little bit. That makes me optimistic. What's been wrong with this Pitt team is they've played good defense, but they just haven't been able to score many points on offense. They hung 55. We'll put them there. And then don't feel great about Cal. Wasn't impressed week one. Virginia, Wake, Stanford, Duke. I think when you get to this tier, I just have question marks about the talent level of these teams. You know what I mean? Duke and Stanford won, Wake won. They all five of them won their football games. But when I go back and watch, I just say I think there's a little bit of dip in terms of the team talent with these teams in the ACC. Cal plays Auburn, so we're going to get some answers. Duke plays Northwestern, so we're going to get some answers. That being said, that's where I have these teams in terms of just got question marks about the talent level of these programs. That'll round it out. Again, some significant changes to be expected next week, but I think Miami fans, you got to be feeling really good about where you sit in terms of the ACC Power Rankings post week one. Subject to change, will change next week. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let me know the teams that I'm too high on, might be sleeping on. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.